coming from the north. Anan gadol, right? A great cloud. Ve'esh mislakachas, and a spinning fire. So these, in general, we're not going to sit here and study the whole Yecheskel, but we could, because basically the whole Chassidus is based on this. This is called Maisa Merkava, right? The Kabbalistic, journeys into the Pardes is based on reading this and understanding the depths of it. So in a small way, we're just going to say that these three things represent the three Gimel Klippas HaTameim, right? Ruach Sara, right. Anan Gadol, and Eish Mislakachas, which is basically the three impure elements of wind, that's wind, the Anan, water, and fire. Right. So earth is not in there, which is we're going to talk about this probably at another Parshas Chukas, but just in short, why are the three impure levels of Klippa they represent three elements but not earth? So it says that earth is sort of the basic matter of a thing, and the wind, the air, and the fire and the water are sort of what builds it into a metzias, right? It shapes it, as it were. So if you break something down to its absolute sort of core, it's not from the three impure levels of klippa anymore, because that, what we call that, is called the koach of desire, the power of just wanting something. Now, if the want takes a negative shape in water, which is going to be a want for desires of the flesh and so forth, or fire, it's going to be a desire for anger, or wind, it's going to be a desire for frivolity. So then it takes a shape, and your desire has been now invested into a negative midah, one of those three elements. But if you just break it down, get it down to its earth, it means just desire, and that desire can be used for good. So anyway, that's why there's only three. Then he goes on, and he says, V'noga lo saviv, sounds familiar. Those are the three impure levels of klippa. And then guess what? There's noga around it. What's noga? Klippas noga, a glow, right? So those are the three impure. Then you have klippas noga, the pure level. And then it says, Mitocha ke'ein ha'chashmal. There you go. Mitocha eish. And in it was something like a chashmal. That's all I wanted to read from here, just to show you where it is. So in other words, if you go past klippas noga, right? Something which is yet more penimi than klippas noga, but you don't yet get to the, right? And if you go a little bit further, it starts talking about the actual chariot, right? So it's after the chariot, but it's before the klippas. So it's this intermediary stage called the chashmal. You follow what I'm saying here?
It's so crazy how they drive electricity from that stuff.
Right. I mean, Israelis, they'll come up with it if they can. What he translates there as radiance? Okay. It's kind of like...
Luminescence.
Okay.
Luminescence.
Okay.
It's a word that's not used anywhere else, though?
Okay, but we don't know what electricity is, so it might as well be Chashmal.
That's it. It's a Chashmal.
Well, but that's when you take a religious language and you make a secular language out of it. You have the power to pull these beautiful,
It's true, but it's crazy. It's got like one use in the whole thing. Like,
I'm not sure if that's the only place it's used, but this is what it is. It's a very spiritual thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, all right. I don't know if it's. We should just see what we're talking about here a little bit. So this is something in between, basically, the realms of kedusha and the realms of klippa, right? All right. So then yesterday we said about it that it is. We don't have our board. Okay, we sort of do. It's the chitzonius of Binah, which surrounds za and nukva. Remember that language that we said? It's the external aspect of Binah, which surrounds the realm of za, the midos, and nukva, malchus, right? And that's pretty much as far as we got in terms of trying to wrap our heads around this thing, I think. So let's go inside.
Where are we inside again, Rabbi?
The line starts with the word chashmal. Okay, so we said chitzonius habida shemalbi shumakif as yud spheres de za, v'yud spheres de nukva. You see that? Everyone has a copy of the mimer. They're passing around somewhere. This mimer, yeah.
Just mimer.
Mimer is the name for the Hasidic discourses. Okay, so it surrounds, it's makif to Yud, the 10 spheres of Za and the 10 spheres of Nukva, as we said yesterday. Kasnus or. Kisnos or. Anyway, this is likened to the the garments of skin that were made for Adam and Chava. Umalbisham mitzidehem, and we said yesterday it surrounds them from their sides, and this is in order that there should not be what they shalo yenika sachitzonin. There shouldn't be a suckling or nourishment to the external negative forces, to the bad guys. Umitachas raglehem hu bechinas minal, and under their feet is a shoe. Lios hefsek ben atzilus lebriya v'yitzira. In order there should be a real break, a real distinction between atzilus and to bria and yitzira. Right, this is the shoe. V'nal hazeh, this shoe, hu b'chines ha-masach v'aparsa ha-mafsik ben atzilus lebriya. So this, now we are kind of have a little bit more insight. This whole idea that we're calling this curtain, this separator between atzilus and bria, this is what it is. It's called the shoe. It's like, Malchus is basically the foot, and there's a thing surrounding it underneath it, which is the shoe. And this is this curtain which separates Atzilus and the lower world. As it says in the Eitz Chaim, Shar Mem Aleph, Perek Aleph, Uperek Vav. And in Shar Mem, Perek Aleph. You want to check out the Eitz Chaim. And he says, Kamo Sheperush Rashi, L'tznius. And this is what Rashi says, it's for tznius. It's to hide the full gamut of delight from the lower worlds. You shouldn't be able to just peer into the Beis Hamikdash. So you shouldn't be able to peer in to the world of Atzilus. There's a curtain. And what it means is that there should not be the full revelation of light from Atzilus into Bria. Ki'im b'derech masach, only through a curtain. Shamalchus d'Atzilus bokeya hamasach v'nasa atik lebria. And so the curtain doesn't keep the light entirely out, because Malchus of Atzilus breaks forth through the Masach, and it becomes what's called Atik to Bria. Atik to Bria, of course, Atik means Keser, right? One of the levels of Keser. Yes. So Atik to Bria, in other words, what is the difference between Malchus of Atzilus and Atik of Bria?
That Malchus of Atzilus, it's like the Keser of Keser the Bria.
So that's just makes them the same. So what I'm saying, what's the difference between them?
That's a crazy question.
Between them?
Because there's something called Malchus of Atzilus, there's something called Atik of Bria.
And one's in Atzilus, so there's there's the...
No, but it's above Bria. But it's still called on Bria?
Keser is above,
there's a curtain between them, or?
Stopsless in a certain way in Bria.
Is it in the
Malchus, it's the lowest level of manifestation, meaning it's fully revealed in Atzilus and Malchus, but in Bria, it's not. It has to be like the parsa, covered up to such an extent that it.
So what's the difference between Atik of Atzilus of Bria and Malchus of Atzilus?
The Malchus of Atzilus is starting to manifest. The other one is not really yet manifested.
Yeah. Another word.
All right, let's put it like this: there's no difference between them, except that they're playing. It's the same thing, playing two different roles. Right? It's playing two different roles. When we call it Malchus of Atzilus, it's in a state where it's the final sphere of Atzilus, and it's receiving the full, like all Malchus, it's like receiving the full revelation. It's the Makabel, it's the receiver. So it's receiving the full revelation of Atzilus, and it's a Kli. All of a sudden, that same sphere becomes the Keser, or the Atik of Bria. It means that it's in a position now of giving hashpah. It's not receiving, it's giving, right? But why is it called the Keser of Bria? Because it's at level of hashpah, which is completely beyond the ability of Bria to grasp what it really is. So it always remains sort of above its head. That's what it means. The crown is above the head, because you can't ever. Bria will never really know what Malchus of Atzilus is, right? Or what Keser of Bria is. It's a Keser. But in other words, this is the power that Malchus has, even though there's this curtain, right? So Malchus is able to break through the curtain in a certain way. In other words, that's what makes it become the Keser. If it could break through the curtain without the curtain being there, it would basically eliminate the concept of there being a world of Bria. Because if the light of Atzilus can go into Bria as it is, it makes it Atzilus light, right? Remember, it's like what we talked about, the idea of the curtain. Is you can have light coming through a door, light coming through a window, light coming through a hole. but it's all the same light. You can minimize it, but even if you have the light of the whole coming through, if it's direct sunlight going into Bria, it's going to look like Atzilus. So if you put a curtain, so that's what really makes one world and another world completely different. So it's called Atik of Bria, because it's no longer, because there is such a thing as Bria now. It's because it's going through a curtain, it's remaining aloof to Bria, but at the same time, it's shining through. But as it shines through, it changes itself fundamentally from what it was before, so it creates like the appearance of a new world with its own sort of specifications. You get it? Okay. The Kain B'Kol Ola, and frankly, that happens in every world.
I was going to ask.
There's the Kesser of one world is the Malchus, right? In other words, the other way around. The Malchus of one world becomes the Kesser of the world below it. But the fact that we call it Kesser means it stays aloof in its primary quality and goes through a curtain, and therefore it enables another dimension to come into focus.
Malchus has this inherited power of
breaking through the curtain, right? Malchus says, yeah, that's a good point that you make there. Why can't, why is it Dafka Malchus that has this power of sort of spilling over? So we say, because all the Malchuses are Kesser in a certain sense. And this is not really the time for this conversation, but since you've stumbled into it, there's a link between the highest level and the lowest level, right? So we call it Kesser Malchus. And in other words, it goes together. Who gets the Kesser? The Melech. Right? So these two levels go together. There's a crown on the king. So the lowest level has an implicit sort of likeness to the very highest level, and that's what gives the lowest level, the Malchus, the power to sort of barrel through and at least give some light and break through the curtain, right? And come out the other side. The analogy for that, I think we spoke about it in different classes. If you have like a full barrel of water, right, and then there's some water breaking through the cracks. So even though what comes out of the cracks of the barrel is just a tiny drop compared to what's in the barrel itself, but those tiny drops contain inside of them obviously a much greater power. All the other water wasn't able to get out of the barrel at all, right? So these, even though it's like a little ray of light, but it's a proof that there's a huge gevura contained in that little ray that was able to break out, the little drop that was able to break out because it pushed through. It was like the lucky winner, So inside of that water that pushed through, there's an extra power that the water inside the barrel doesn't have. So too, Malchus has the ability to push through the curtain, and even though it doesn't come in as is, otherwise it would nullify the whole world,
right.
But it is able to push through and breathe life into the lower level.
Wow. What about Kesser of Tzilus?
Same thing. There's levels of, there's the Or Ein Sof above Atzilus, and that if that light would shine into Atzilus, it would nullify Atzilus. So there has to be a Kesser between the Or Ein Sof and Atzilus, which basically serves a similar function. It's not exactly, so we don't call it a curtain,
well,
but it's a similar function that it serves.
And you also mentioned that
this is the Indian of Tzimtzum in general, contraction.
Well, you also mentioned that there's different aspects of Kesser. You said like the one we're talking about right now is Atik. Would that like be similar to diving into Malchus and looking at the 10 spheres of Malchus and kind of?
Not exactly. Atik and Arich are the two parts of Kesser.
Right.
And because in order to get from one status to another status, you need an intermediary in between. So Kesser, which is basically what enables the, let's say, Or Ein Sof to go into Atzilus, right? It needs an intermediary. And the intermediary is defined by something that has a shaykhs, bears resemblance to both levels. Right? So Moshe Rabbeinu, for example, is called Ish HaElokim. He's called the man of God, or the God man. Because he's, as it says, he's in the Midrash, he's half God, half man. And therefore he's able to relate to God, he's able to translate it to man. The same thing is true with the Indian of Kesser. That it has two levels in it, Atik and Arich. The Atik is, even the word Atik means to be completely removed. Something is netak, it's like it's just torn out, separated entirely. So that's the idea that the higher part of Kesser is completely removed from having anything to do with worlds or spheros whatsoever. But Arich is the 10 spheros which are called long, right? Which means the idea that they're long is that they're in their present state, they're still too high to be the spheros of the world they're going into, but at least they can recognize and sort of jive with the concept that there's going to be spheros. So it has a relationship to, in other words, even Moshe's man level was still higher than the regular man level, but he could at least relate to being a man.
Right.
right? So therefore, inside of that one sphere called Kesser, it's able to make the bond and make the transition there from like infinite to finite.
Wow.
I have a question though. Moshe Rabbeinu was Chacham.
What's that? What'd you say?
Moshe was that intermediary.
Moshe was, yeah.
He's
Ani omed bein Hashem beinechem. He actually says, "I'm standing between you and God," like he's in the middle.
right. Pasternak is
Yeah.
a shot from Chacham with Atzilus though. How can Chacham with Atzilus be intermarried for something higher than itself, for example?
Moshe Rabbeinu's makar is not always the same. Sometimes we say the whole Maimer explains this neshama from tohu, which is more in Kesser. Sometimes he says chokhmah, but again, even in chokhmah itself has the same quality. Chokhmah itself is an intermediary between Kesser and the rest of the worlds. So in other words, this concept, it's
right.
You need a few intermediaries, right? Because even if you get to Kesser, so the idea is that the idea of Kesser is able to bring finite light into a world, but then all of a sudden to get to that light is a metzias of a yesh, right? That's a different story. In other words, metzias of a yesh means not only is it contracted finite godliness, it's now going to become an entity other than God, so to speak. So you need another intermediary to bring that what now is considered what's now finite godliness, which is accomplished by Kesser, right? To go and become an entity, and that you need another intermediary, which is called Chokhmah, right? So both Kesser and Chokhmah are intermediaries in different ways. So even if you want to say Moshe comes from Chokhmah Vatzilus, and he's an intermediary, the intermediary parts inside of Chokhmah, they really just gain their identity from the intermediary parts inside of Kesser. So I mean, Gavoa, it goes higher and higher. In other words, they're all really the same. It's like they just appear in different places. It's like a macrocosm, microcosm kind of thing. What you see, is DNA in like a tiny little organism. It's really like a small imprint of how the worlds work, and beyond that, how bigger worlds work. So if Moshe is an intermediary, in a certain sense, you could say he's the same intermediary of Chokhmah, he's the same intermediary of Kesser. He's an intermediary. He bears those two qualities. You follow what I'm saying? Or no?
It's very Kabbalistic, but yeah.
We are in a Kabbalah class, so what do you expect? Yeah?
Intermediary, or are we deeper than that?
I would say he's, the Mashiach is also the definition of combining two forces, right? The infinite and the finite, where we're saying like the lights of Tohu and the Kalim of Tikkun, the godliness and the worldliness, it's mamash in of an intermediary.
Rabbi, so
It's the highest thing you can be. A shliach. The Rabbi pointed us to be shluchim. What's a shliach? Dafka an intermediary. He's the idea that he, is sent from this realm of kedusha in order to go and transform the worldliness, and he's the one who sort of bears both parts. It's not the Rebbe that goes to, Palm Springs and starts to make Yidden, because the Rebbe is like the infinite side that the world cannot relate to, so to speak. So he sends an intermediary who's like half Rebbe, half normal person, and through that intermediary he's able to make California into a Rebbe.
So we said that Machur Vatzilut, when it goes past the curtain, it becomes the Keter of Bria?
Yes, it just changes its name basically,
Okay.
and winds up with a different definition, a different function.
Atzilus, just the term, is that the outside of the vessel?
Atzilus is the highest of the four worlds. There's four worlds: Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. And these, what's that? What you got there?
Oh, this is called phone.
Let me see that for a second.
No, I don't surrender phones.
No, I don't smoke. What'd you say?
I don't surrender phones.
Oh, you don't surrender phones. Wow,
You're gonna have to take it.
you're a free man. Interesting, because I don't allow phones in the class, so we're gonna have to go horn to horn on that
Rock
one.
has hit the hard place.
Like the,
Okay.
It's my dictionary app.
He doesn't surrender phones either. I'm sorry.
Use it if you want.
Anyway, so there's
The Battle of the Shore.
right. There's four worlds, right? The classic four worlds, and the highest of the four worlds, which is again an intermediary between the infinite light and the lower three worlds, or like we just had here in the Siddur, where there was that idea of the water, wind, and fire, which was like, pushed off to the lower entities. And then there was like an intermediary. Remember I spoke about it in the beginning of class. So it's all kind of the same picture, but Atzilus is the highest of the four worlds. And that means even though it's a world, it's not a world like the other three because it's really a perfectly godly world. There's no feeling of self or disconnect or separateness there.
And the other three, just
Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. And all of them are defined by 10 spheros. They all have 10 spheros, the same 10 spheros.
Bria,
But
Yetzirah, and Asira.
Asiya.
Yeah.
But the difference between the 10 spheros is just exactly what we're saying. Like it goes into like a microcosm of the. It's just a vague imprint of what came before.
The system of the human being is the same system as the planet, which is the same system
Right.
as the universe.
Exactly. Okay, so let's go on.
It's actually much exactly like that.
Yeah, it's exactly like that. So
Well, just as within the human being, the cell is a system just like the human being, and within the cell is the atoms, which is a system just like the cell. It's the same
Right.
over and over again.
But think about this for a second. When did mankind, as a scientific sort of being, figure that out? In other words, that's like sort of modern science, isn't it? The way that we like realize that in the cell is like the whole blueprint of the man.
It's like 100 years, I think.
Well, as opposed to in Kabbalah, which is figured out.
that was around
I'm just saying, it's always like mamish fascinating when you realize that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was describing this outright, but like mankind has sort of just like come to realize this truth thousands of years later. It's amazing.
Downloads of knowledge happen at different times without.
I'm just saying, it's mamish fascinating, no?
I agree.
One
Should
of
it-
them's one's Lamata Lamaylan.
Yeah.
Also the earth.
Anyways, let's go on. Shababriya naase gam kein chashmal. So what we're saying here, Hebra, in Bria, we're saying there's also a chashmal. In other words, the second world down, it also has its intermediary. In order
Is it
to,
our world?
no, the second world down. Our world is at the bottom of all the four worlds,
Below Asira.
below Asiya. Yeah, we call it Asiya. It's also called Asiya, but it's called Asiya Gashmi, or the physical Asiya. Those are all four spiritual worlds.
Got it. Thank you.
So now in Bria, the second world down, there's also a Chashmal. And the Chashmal there also comes from Chitzonius Habina. Right? Remember our picture from yesterday? The sphere of Binah, its external part wraps around the lower seven spheros. Right? You want to see the picture again?
Oh,
It's
no,
right over there.
I know.
Okay. Umakif lezun, and it surrounds Za and Nukfa. Ad shenasa minal, to the point that it becomes a shoe. Right? That's what it does.
Shoe?
A shoe.
And now
A shoe for the world of
It becomes a shoe. What's a shoe? Is a buffer between the foot and the ground, basically, right? So
A shoe for who? For which world?
every world, he's basically what he just said is that between Atzilus and Bria there's a shoe, and between Bria and Yetzirah there's a shoe, and forever.
The shoe is like another like a word for like the curtain.
Yeah.
Or the Chashmal, yeah,
The
the shoe.
Chashmal.
It's called exactly same thing.
the Chashmal seems to have a different purpose in the curtain. even
No,
though
no,
it's
it
on the
is
same
the
place.
curtain. We're saying it is the curtain.
But wait, so now we're saying that there's a shoe in between.
He's calling when he finally got to his definitions. He says basically this Chashmal, this is the curtain that we were discussing.
The shoe is in between Yetzirah and Asiya, or
Yeah,
there's
oh,
one-
between every world there's a shoe. If Malchus is the foot, right? So the Chashmal is the shoe on the foot. It's like a level. Remember, that's why I opened
So
up the
Chashmal
that's
is
why I opened up
curtain,
the
right?
siddur in the middle, in the beginning of the class.
Chashmal
Because he's
is
basically
curtain.
saying you have these three lower levels of klippa, right? Then you have klippas noga, so right, and then you have this, which is basically those four levels represents the lower world, right? It has its klippas noga, its basic elements, and then how those elements sort of, veer off into their negative states. And above that, before you get into that world proper, you have this chashmal, right? And then above the chashmal is the world above it. The chashmal is this intermediary, this curtain, which separates the two worlds.
And the bridge.
So now we're saying that it's a shoe.
And a
It's
bridge.
curtain.
The curtain is a shoe,
The chashmal.
the shoe is a chashmal, the chashmal is the parsa, A equals B equals C equals D.
Okay.
And in all ways, Malchus sometimes calls itself Keser and jumps down a level.
Right, so going into the
I'll check.
parentheses here, it's a little bit of a parentheses we would want to skip, but it just doesn't have that much information for us. But let's just say it real quick, because there's one interesting point in there. So what do we say? That in Bria, the Chashmal is also from Binah, external aspect of Binah, surrounding Zun, right? Za and Nukfa. Stop me if you don't understand what I just said, but you do understand what I said?
The two bottom pieces.
Two bottom pieces. So I asked you if you want to see the picture again. He says you already have the picture in your mind.
Yeah, but this is all like
the same-
holistic. I need you to break it down. Like
It's very simple, right? This is our picture is now giving unique to the Chitzoni. But okay, so you have Bina, the external part of Bina makes this circle around Za and Nukfa. That's called That's called the chitzonius of Binah is makif to zoom.
Okay.
That's the language. Okay.
Zah is 6 and Nukva is 1, right? Sphero.
In terms of there being 7 spheros here, yeah, but we had said that each one of these is like a quadrant or a world which has its own 10 spheros.
Right.
So it's only called 6 like when it's
Rabbi,
in a certain
ask you a question,
context.
though? What does that mean? What does that mean? Like up here, like
Normal- normal human beings?
Normal world, yeah. Like speak our language. Like,
English.
Well, we've been speaking it for a long time, basically.
but on
It's
the
essentially
Shema, like, what does that mean that we get like a certain shachal from godliness, that our emotions gets like from understanding?
yes. It means that there's.
godliness?
Well, we already said that, and not actually how it does with the soul. We didn't say, but we said that if this would not be there, okay, then the flow of Malchus would go directly into the lower worlds, and it would not. There would no longer be lower worlds.
Meaning,
Because there would not be, instead of there being
Too
a
much
curtain,
light.
there would be a window.
Right.
And if you have a window, then what's the difference between the light of Atzilus to the light of Bria? There'd be no difference.
Right.
Right?
For
So if you want to
example-
see what Bria is,
Yeah.
you've got to stop the hard flow of Atzilus from coming in there. And again, as we said in the first day of the class, it's a tzimtzum, and it's like sort of a dimming down of the light, but it has a positive quality. Just like when you go to sleep,
Like a silver light.
suddenly your digestive powers reveal themselves,
Right.
which are very important for the organism as a whole. So even though we're going down, it's not just stam going down. We're really revealing other also good things, and that's why the mimer is called Vivdila Paroches Lechem. What are we talking? Why is this called a curtain to the base of Mikdash? Because it's just because you go into from the holy of holies into the holy doesn't mean you're a schlepper. You're holy.
You're going right,
You're not
exactly.
holy. I'm holy. So in other words, it's showing you all the different minutia inside of kedusha itself. Now it does dip down into outside of kedusha, right? Because there's also curtains going from the Mikdash until the Azara. So you're already going. You're still in the base of Mikdash complex, but you're going further, right? So, in other words, there's gates and doors. Ultimately, when you leave sort of the structure of Yerushalayim, then you go into
Tel Aviv.
But you go into regular Eretz Yisrael. You could call that still holy. But then there's Chutz La'aretz, which is the idea you're going mamish into the klippas, right? You're out of the realm of, which also has a certain positive quality. Because every stage that you're going to reveal is showing you something of Hashem that you couldn't see was nullified in the higher place.
Okay.
But, as you go lower and lower, it starts to become problematic. Not holy.
There's
as it
also
were.
a curtain here, right?
It becomes chol,
It becomes
which is
more-
mundane.
right.
And then the mundane itself can already go into the unholy. Right? So that's what we started off. There's
Right.
the
No, I just wanna
3
bring myself
impure
back
levels
to
of
it,
klippa,
that's
then
all.
there's the noga,
Right.
then there's the chashmal, then there's the chariot.
Okay.
Alright?
There's also Chashmal here, right?
Why do you say that?
Or between
Like here you're saying.
No.
This is Atzilut, no?
This whole world is Atzilus. I'm saying this is the 10 spheres of Atzilus. Yeah, you could also say Atzilus B'Yitzir Nasiya, but that's not, you wouldn't draw it like this per se.
Okay.
So if you want to say that this is Atzilus, and this is like the Orient Sof, then there's also something here which blocks.
So now we're talking in Atzilut.
Yeah, this is all in Atzilus. This is the in Binah of Atzilus.
Okay.
The external part of Binah of Atzilus is what comes down and makes the Chashmal around Za and Nukfa, so that Malchus has to break through this curtain, this shoe, whatever you call it, the Chashmal, in order to create the world of Bria and give over to the world of Bria. You follow? So what we're getting out of these parentheses then, which we didn't do yet, but it says, let's go. I'm going to leave this board here for a second to make it clearer. In the Eitz Chaim Shar Mem Aleph, Perek Aleph, Sham Masach, Shebein Bri Yitzira, there he says that the curtain between Bria and Yitzira, Eino mi Bina de Bria. It's actually not from Bina of Bria, Elam mi Tiferes de Bria. But it comes from Tiferes of Bria. Ela shebetiferes yesh gam kein chashmal. It's just that from Tiferes there's also a chashmal. So what is he saying? This is mamash kabbalistic, and we're not going to get this deep into it. But what he's basically saying is the way that it works, that the power to create this shoe comes from Bina. That's only true in Atzilus and Bria. But between Bria and Yetzira, if you go down lower, then the power to make the chashmal, which is basically the ability to forge a shoe and to therefore make an intermediary between one world and the lower world, it no longer comes from such a high place. It now comes from Tiferes, which is over here,
Of Bria.
right? Of Bria. In other words, why is that significant? So I'll tell you. Actually, I will tell you. We're going to go into it in a second inside the mimer, but because I don't want to like just leave it in some Kabbalistic conversation here. Let's break it down. This is what you were looking for, right? What does this mean to me, basically, right? In other words, so what he's saying is, what's the purpose of this shoe, and what's the purpose of these leather garments that were fashioned for Adam and Chava? So the idea is that Adam and Chava here represents the emotions, and furthermore, they represent the expression of the emotions. In other words, like how the emotions, reveal themselves and show themselves. So the idea is that your emotions are essentially very animalistic, right? If they're not guided by the intelligence, then they can easily go into foreign desires, right? The water, the air, the air, or the fire, right? That's what we said, like those three gimel klippas hatameis, right? That's when your emotions basically they're being leaked out, their precious energy, into places that they don't belong, right? So in order to guard that from happening, to make a clothing for it and to protect it from the elements, to make a shoe and so forth, you need something higher than them to wrap itself around them and protect them. What's higher than the emotions? The intellect. In other words, if you use your mind, you won't allow your emotions to spill out into places they don't belong. So in a very simple level, there's this Kabbalistic language for saying something pretty simple, is that if you use your intellect and you Binah, and it will create. Now, it's not the Binah itself, because at the end of the day, it's not the intellect, so to speak, which is operating. Your emotions are operating. It's just if your emotions to operate without spilling, right, then they have to have some access point or some flow from the intelligence protecting them. So the external part of Binah, not Binah itself. You're not in your emotional. You're in your intellectual place when you're mamish walking through the aisles of the grocery store and you see whatever, a chocolate cake, right? You're not meditating on Kabbalah at that moment. So you're really just dealing with your midos. The question is, do you have enough intellect flowing into your midos, into your emotions, so that they're essentially protected and they will not leak out into foreign desires?
Wow.
You see what's happening there?
Yes.
You did it.
So
You
now,
answered this question.
that being said, that's from Atzilus to Bria and from Bria to Yetzira. From Bria to Yetzira, right? That's from Atzilus to Bria.
Right.
But from Bria to Yetzira, it doesn't already require an emotional ray to protect the emotions, because you're going now to a lower place. You only need from Tiferes. In other words, the emotions themselves have an external part, which can make a shoe or a buffer zone between the realm of Yetzirah. It doesn't have to come from such a high place in you, because it's not the emotions that you're protecting as much. It's sort of like the outward expression of your action. It's more of like an Indian of Kabbalah soul or something. In other words, how would you put this? Let's say you love Hashem, right? But the love is not necessarily glaring at that moment, right? You're not like sort of in the base medrash davening and feeling the love. But you still have an external ray from that love. And that is, let's say, called Kabbalah soul, right? Just like obedience.
Right.
Like if you love Hashem, you're going to for sure do everything you're supposed to do. But if you're not feeling the love, you still want like a ray of that love to just enclose you and keep you in the healthy world. That's called obedience. So you're just going to walk by the cake, okay? Not because like your meditations are making sure that your emotions are not out of line, but your emotions themselves are just sort of like in a lockdown state that I'm going to maintain my love for Hashem and not allow myself to just, overstep my bounds. So it's like it's not so much protected by emotions, it's that the emotions themselves are just staying vigorous, staying sort of congealed and not letting themselves to falter on their own. Does that make a little bit of sense?
Like a skafia.
It's like more like a skafia, right? Whereas it's exactly what it is. That's what I'm saying. It's like Kabbalah soul, iskafia. Whereas the other one, iskafia means resistance, right? Like in other words, just obedience. I was saying, controlling yourself. Whereas the other one, the higher version, it's not so much controlling yourself in that way of just having obedience. It's that you're actually containing it so that it is obedience, but it's a much higher order of obedience. And you're not even allowing yourself to love an extraneous thing, right? Whereas the lower level, what can you do? You already love the extraneous thing, but you're going to be obedient and stay in line and not allow that love to express itself at very least. There you go, right? The first one, from the mind controlling the heart, is that you're not even going to allow your... Let me start over, because I think I put it together in my own mind a little bit better. The first one, from Atzilus to Bria, is that you're literally not going to allow yourself to have false and foreign emotions. And you're not even going to have any interest in the chocolate cake. I'm saying chocolate cake, but I don't mean chocolate cake, Chevra. This is serious stuff in our lives. We're falling into all kinds of things, right? Let's just call it chocolate cake. We'll sweeten it up a little bit.
Are we talking
right?
the world?
But the idea is that the world of Atzilus going into the world of Bria, which is basically what he's saying here. Yeah, but what we're saying here is like, it's the mind controlling the heart in such a way that you will not even have negative emotions. You'll only love God and you'll only fear God and you'll never love the chocolate cake. You won't even come to that, right? So for sure, if you don't even love the chocolate cake, you're going to just zoom through the aisle. Nothing's going to even affect you because you're not even drawn to it, because that chashmal of your intellect is preserving your emotions to stay holy. But go down a level, you don't have the luxury of your mind being working for you so hard. So you actually just stuck with a level of foreign desires. But you still have like the panemius of the heart. And the panemius, the inner level of the heart, it's still with Hashem. So it sends out a ray, that's called tiferes, by the way, right? The inner emotions versus the outer emotions. So and that's what he says right here in the Eitz Chaim, that the tiferes, the inner part of the emotions, it sends out its own ray, much like Binah sent out its ray before. But in this time, it doesn't stop the emotions from loving foreign things. It just stops the emotions from acting out on those foreign things. And it's enough of a protection to have hiskafia, but not necessarily to curb your whole interest in it to begin with.
Because it's holy.
Because it's already not connected with the mind anymore. You're in a lower world where mind cannot be in control, right? Because you've gone too low. In other words, alavai, the chashmal of Atzilus would have worked, but now you find yourself in Bria.
Is it also the external part of Tiferes or the internal part of
It could be the, he doesn't say here, but I mean, in general, Tiferes, it's probably the external part of Tiferes, which is the internal part of the Midos.
Got it.
Atzilus is wearing shoes, but Bria is only wearing sandals.
Something like that, right? No, it's not. He's not joking. There's actually something called the mina. There's called the shoe. There's called the sandal, right? There's different. There's different. That's why we have different types of shoes in the world. I'm serious. There's different ways of covering your feet. And halachically speaking, even there's different types of shoes. Some of them are, makabel tuma, some not. It's like there's all kinds of these different minutia in the law. It's Pashut all talking Kabbalah language. Yeah. Your sandals, the straps break, can you carry it on Shabbos? All these things are mamish aligned. Yeah, please.
Tiferet is beauty, right?
Right.
So it goes from a place of thinking or intellect, which is protecting the emotions, and then as you get lower, it's a place of beauty,
which is protecting emotions. Beauty is one word for it, but also sort of the idea is that it's harmony, which is able to align opposing forces, right? The idea is that it's in the central column.
That's beautiful.
Right? So that's
but
called...
Even if the intellect can't control harmony itself,
it's able to at least, in other words, a certain balance.
A sense of harmony.
A sense of balance is at least able to stop you from acting, like going off your diet, just from a standpoint of, not even intellectual, just from a standpoint of staying in balance.
Right. Exactly. Which is more ingrained into the thinking, sort of built in.
If you're lucky, it's not built in. You have to work on it. In other words, a ray that comes out of Chitzonius Binah is still something that you have to sort of summon. Right. So that ray doesn't necessarily just come out by itself.
You got to reveal it.
All right, let's go on. We're kind of sparsely touching on the words here. We got to go a little bit deeper into the words. Okay, so let's just go past this parentheses because that's the part we wanted. Okay, lahavin inyan chashmal. This gets a little bit more clear. Some of these things we already said. So to understand this concept of what is the chashmal, ma inyono, right? What does it really do? Hine mibsari echze elokai. So this is, by the way, a very famous line. Everyone should get it in their heads. Some have said that this is the Alter Rebbe's whole shita, right? It's mibsari echze eloka. From my flesh I see God. That the whole concept of why the previous ages had to just deal with charts like that, and a student said, but Rabbi, what the heck does it have to do with anything? They didn't have an answer for that. But the Alter Rebbe's whole thing was, you could see everything from your flesh. That God, your body and our own process of psychology, etc., is that. So all of a sudden, he brought it down into a very realistic place. So he says, let's take a look. From my own flesh, I can see God. Ki b'midos ein sham hisgalus kol haseichel. that in the emotions, you do not have the full revelation of your intellect, right? When your emotion, you have your emotional sphere is cooking, and you're like feeling your emotion. It's a kind of a sign that your full intellectual powers are not in full blast, right? When you only feel emotions when you sort of tune down, way down your intellect. Because if your intellect is fully working, your emotional sphere will be nullified. You won't experience it. You have it, but it's like inside of it's been bottled. It's been eliminated due to too much light of the intellect. Which is again, it's a good way. Torah. That's why one of the reasons why studying Torah implicitly helps your midos is because when you spend all day with your mind on full blast, you are automatically like a calm, collected person because you don't allow your emotions to get going, right? And how much more so when you learn Panimius Torah. Now, it doesn't mean that in such a way you're going to automatically fix yourself, but you certainly will fix yourself during the time that you're learning because you're not even allowing your negative emotions to sort of come into focus, right? So now let me just stop here and say, so why don't we just learn Torah a whole day and just ignore our midos altogether? Because again, we said there's a good quality of the Chashmal, turning off the high power of the upper one and allowing the lower one to surface. Because Hashem wants a dira b'tachtonim. So He wants to turn off your intellect and allow your emotions to surface because He wants you to be able to work on them, that they don't have to be perfected emotions just because they're nullified. He wants them to even be in a state of expression and yet they're still godly. So that's the whole concept of basically filtering out the higher world and allowing the lower world to surface, even though it's going to produce a bunch of junk to begin with, but at least you can now fix the junk, because when your intellect is shining in full, your emotions don't even have a time to express themselves, so you can't make them better. They're just like sort of nullified. It's like a criminal. You put him in jail, right? Okay, good job. Yeah, you made the world a better place. Except he's going to come out one day. Exactly. Or even when he doesn't come out, you got a criminal in there somewhere. Whereas if you rehabilitate him, so then you've really done the job. But you have to, if you rehabilitate him, you got to let the criminal out of jail, right? Because you're never going to know if he's rehabilitated when he's sitting in jail. So this is the whole idea. You have to of the Chashmal in general. You have to close, off the flow from the higher world to allow the lower world to be perceivable, so that you can bring the godliness into it. So Ephraim's not here today. But going back, he asked, what does it have to do with Lech Lecha again? So this is Lech Lecha. Avram Avinu represents the ability. Lech Lecha means go down there now, right? And it's talking about the higher exalted Chokhmah, Avram, which means exalted Chokhmah. Go all the way down there and show yourself. Ela aretz asher areka, to the land that I will show you. It doesn't mean I will show you the land. It was I will show you to the land, right? So this higher level of Abraham, which is basically the concept of allowing the lower land to become rectified, having already been hatched. Just like exactly what we were just talking about now. That's what this connection, Bechlal, is all connected to Lech Lecha.
Went to the south, right? He traveled to the south.
Yeah. Is everyone following this?
Yeah.
Okay.
By the way, Rabbi, they're doing that all across the world. They're doing that all across the world. They're changing.
That's the Chabad, baby.
The prison
They're
systems,
out there.
They're teaching
the Aleph Institute.
The Aleph Institute, yeah, they're teaching them from inside out.
Okay. So, going on. So, the idea is that in the emotions, you do not have the full gamut of the seich, of the intellect shining. She'im kain, hayu amidos betelim ba'seichel. Because if that was the case, then the emotions would be totally nullified by the light of the intellect. Just like we said, that if the window was shining the light into Bria without the curtain, there would be no world of Bria. Right? And if the intellect was in full blast, the midos would be nullified and there would be no expression to them. They would not be able to be drawn out. But on the other hand, if you completely remove the intellect and you just show midos raw without any shaykhs to the intellect anymore, you're going to wind up with a bunch of animals, right? And so therefore you need a little bit of the intellect to keep on shining through, to protect the emotions so they don't go running into a direction they don't need to go in. And that's called the Chashmal, right? That's what we said, the Chashmal. It separates the intellect from the emotions, but it also allows Malchus to break through and become Keser or Atik of Bria. So that, and then what do we say? It basically surrounds the Za and Nukfa and makes them a little shoe, a little covering, a little encasement, so they're protected from spilling into the wrong direction. And what is this? What is this Chitzonius Binah? Why does the dafka come from Binah? Because Binah means hisbonenus, meditation. In other words, so now it becomes really mamish practical. What does it mean in our practical lives? Is that why do we learn Hasidus before we daven? Because we meditate deeply on the Eibishter, we daven, and then you're going to go into the world, which means you're beferush, separating yourself from that meditation. You can't go be a fisherman, or maybe a fisherman's a little bit of a relaxed job, but you can't, go be a Wall Street trader and simultaneously be in the state of a Hasidic meditation. You got to pay attention to what you're doing. But if you meditate, then a little ray of that meditation will stay with you and it will protect you so that when you're in Wall Street, you're not going to be like those guys.
Fishermen actually would be like a very conducive job for something.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're not using a pole, you're using a big net.
You understand? So that's why it's called an external ray from Binah Dafka. Because Binah is where you do the Hizbonenus. You getting this?
Rabbi,
in order so that there should not be a suckling from the negative forces. And again, what is the suckling from the negative forces? That easily the chocolate cake could just right away take you into another dimension of physicality and cut you off from the godly experience that you had in the shul. So if you don't have a little ray of your divine experience, a little roshem, a little imprint protecting you, then you're think about it like this. You got excited when you learned, right? And your emotions became flaring. So as soon as you stop learning, you've done, in a certain sense, a disservice to yourself because now you're all excited. So if you stop thinking about godliness altogether, you're going to run from the davening to the lunchroom in a very unconducive way. So that's the whole idea, that you need to draw a little bit of that hisbonenus into it, because now you've actually given fuel to your emotions. So in order to make sure that there was now newly burning emotions, don't go the wrong way, you need this chashmal. Shamidos yecholiyos achi.
What wouldn't have any especially?
Where are you? Oh, v'lo haya mehem klal hispashtus v'amshach the midos.
Why?
Because he says if you're 2 lines behind us. Because he said if your intellect was shining in full, there would be no hamshacha to the midos whatsoever, because the seichel would nullify them. But even if you take away the intellect, he's saying you still have to have ha'armu etes, mechitzoni es bina. You still have to have a little shine from the external aspect of bina, from your hisbonenus, in order so that your newly found emotions do not go flying into the wrong direction.
Why wouldn't they have any especially?
Because when the sun is shining, you can't see the moon. Right? If there's too much light, then there's no way to make out the things that are more subtle. When you're in other words, when you're deeply meditating, you're not in love or in fear of anything. You're just in another dimension. Your mind takes over your heart, and you don't feel yourself. Because the problem is that the midos dafka is where the sitra achra, the other side, has a holding. When it comes to mind in general, it's it's possible, but it's very, very much more difficult to sort of go from a state of, to have negative forces, taivas, foreign desires and so forth, be a product of your intellect. It's possible. You have to be really messed up. You have to be like totally brainwashed by a criminal in order for your mind to automatically lead you to doing negative behaviors. Usually your mind is what's guarding you from negative behavior. You think about it, use your head, and you're going to be okay. It's your emotions which, left unchecked, they're automatically just flying into all kinds of directions. They're animalistic. The mind is more like the man, the emotions are the animals. So it's really on the level of emotions in general where the sitra achra has its ability to suckle its energy from. Right? And we're talking cosmically speaking, Hashem also has midos. He also has an emotional sphere. So where do the klippas come from? How from godliness do we get to, evil people and hurricanes and tornadoes? Where does evil come from? Where does it get its life force? Because it certainly is God. There's nothing but God. So it's enlivened by the Eibishter. What the heck is going on there? Why is he giving life force to negativity? So he says it's getting its life force from Hashem's midos, not from Hashem's, so to speak, intellect. Because the midos, unchecked, they're wild. They'll go after the wrong thing, right? They'll put their nose in all kinds of stuff, right? They're not basically guarded. They're just like emotional powerhouses unchecked. So when that's called godly energy, it can go into a negative place. It will be able to be suckled. A bad guy will be able to get power behind his actions by drawing from that place. Because it's not really supervising so much where it gives. It's like an animal. It just goes wherever it wants to. So if you have your intellect, or the godly intellect, in force, which is we are sort of the guardians of the world. When we learn Torah, we champion the intellect of God and make sure that godly intellect is flowing into the world, and therefore it's cutting off the ability for negative forces to access the emotions, because we're guarding the emotions from going into the wrong direction. That's basically the purpose of Torah study. So you're in there studying Torah, and you're asking yourself, why do I care if this guy's ox gored that guy's thing? Like, let's talk about something practical. You don't understand. What you're doing, the spiritual activity that you're doing of learning Torah, is mamish saving the world. And you want to be practical, You can learn about practical things. I'm not saying we can't do that. But anytime you're learning Torah, of any subject whatsoever, it's extremely practical. How much more so when you're learning Panimius Torah, because it does the job even deeper and in much more sophisticated ways. See you tomorrow.
I was just thinking of halacha. Does this make sense that in halacha it says that you can't turn on the light when it's completely dark in a room because it damages your eye, because it damages something by your eyes? Does that make sense here? Like when a person has too much light that sometimes it can blind you and won't allow you to even see the darkness, because it'll just blind you. Like it hurts your eyes, and it's true. Like someone turns on the lights on you in the middle of the night, and you just feel so blinded. It takes you a while, like longer than what it would take if you would just turn on the light little by little, and see it through. I don't know, whatever. I was just thinking.
No, I'm with you there. Yeah, you need to go in stages.
I don't understand how it reads. Why isn't Aramu Etos an answer? There's Aramu Etos is what makes it difficult. Well, how you have a smash to sorrow? Hello.
Here, look, just look here.
Look.
He says like this: Midos ein lehem hisgalus, right? Kol haseichel, right? They don't have in them the full revelation of the seichel. She'im kain, if they did have the full revelation of the seichel in them, hayu midos betelim haseichel. You wouldn't see midos at all. Okay? V'lo haymehem klal hispashtus v'amshach. They wouldn't even come out. Ela sh'af pikein. But if there was there's like a question he doesn't say out right here. If there was no seichel in them, then they would certainly have these pashtus, but they would be negative. They wouldn't be midos al pi seichel. So he says, alpha pikein maki falehem. Alpha pikein, even though there's no seichel in them, it's still maki falehem.
Even though
the seichel is
not to a different question, like it's from the midas if there was that. The answer is